Alabama was the kind of place where the church bell still marked the hours, where folks waved to each other from the porches, and where every new rumor seemed to travel faster than the wind. On the surface, it looked quiet, almost wholesome. But behind closed doors, the town had secrets that could rot a soul faster than the heat of a southern summer. Among the most respected names in that town was Dr. Marcus Harlow. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a voice that could command a room, Marcus had the look of a man born to succeed. Patients lined up outside his clinic, grateful just to have a doctor nearby who appeared competent, confident, and always pressed in his white coat. To the public, he was a man of medicine. To himself, he was untouchable, above his neighbors, above his patients, and certainly above the women who came to him with their aches, their fears, their fragile hopes. Marcus wore his arrogance like another layer of skin. When a woman broke down crying in his office, ashamed of her size or her condition, Marcus would sigh, tap his pen, and push the conversation along. He didn't waste time on sympathy. He prided himself on efficiency, on keeping his clinic moving, on reminding people that he was the one in charge. One woman in particular had lingered in his memory, though he would never admit it. She had sat across from him years ago, her voice trembling, her eyes pleading. She was Clarissa Monroe, weighing over 600 pounds, with a body that barely fit the chair in the exam room. She had begged him to listen, to run tests, to help her understand the infection spreading through her body. But Marcus had waved it off as complications of her weight. "Lose the pounds," he'd said flatly, "and half your problems will disappear." Then he'd walked out, leaving her staring at the wall, humiliated and broken. For Marcus, it was just another patient dismissed, another chart closed. For Clarissa, it was the beginning of a scar that would never heal. Clarissa Monroe did not simply vanish after that humiliating appointment. She carried the weight of it home, into a house that felt less like shelter and more like a cage. Each day she woke with pain searing through her body, but worse than the physical ache was the silence. The knowledge that when she had finally reached out for help, the very person sworn to provide it had turned his back. Neighbors whispered when she ventured outside. Children stared. Cashiers avoided her eyes. She learned to keep her grocery trips to midnight, when the aisles were empty and the world was quieter. Loneliness became a constant companion, pressing against her ribs like an extra layer of weight she could never shed. There were moments when Clarissa stood at the bathroom mirror, staring into her own dark eyes, wondering if she mattered at all. She remembered Marcus's words, cold, efficient, dismissive, and they looped in her mind like a cruel chorus. "Lose the pounds, and half your problems will disappear." It wasn't just a diagnosis, it was a verdict. He had sentenced her to invisibility. But in that silence, something else took root. A fire. Clarissa began to read. Medical journals she found online, patient forums, survival stories. She realized that her infection had never fully gone, that it lingered in her body like a shadow she couldn't shake. And with each flare-up of fever, each sharp stab of pain, she remembered his indifference. She didn't speak of revenge, at least not then. Instead, she told herself she would live, if only to prove Marcus wrong, to outlast his judgment, to rise, one day, not as a victim, but as a storm waiting for the right moment to break. Clarissa had become something of a ghost in town. People whispered about her size, about the way she rarely left her home, about how the world seemed to have swallowed her whole. Yet when she did appear, at the grocery store, at the diner late at night, she carried herself with a strange grace. Her face was round, framed by long dark hair, her eyes deep and unreadable. Some said there was a quiet sadness in her. Others swore there was fire, waiting for the right moment to burn. Years passed, and Marcus's reputation only grew. He bought himself a bigger house on the edge of town, joined the golf club, dated women who looked good on his arm, but never lasted long. To him, relationships were diversions, not commitments. He liked control. He liked the thrill of something forbidden, of knowing he could cross lines and still be admired by day. And that arrogance, his belief that he could play with fire and never be burned, would become his downfall. It started on a humid Friday night. The kind of night when sweat clung to the skin and the air smelled faintly of bourbon and tobacco. Marcus walked into a dimly lit bar on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where the jukebox played blues and the regulars kept to themselves. He ordered a whiskey, loosened his tie, and let the alcohol warm his chest. He was looking for company, or maybe just distraction. That's when he saw her. Clarissa Monroe, sitting alone in a corner booth, dressed in a black dress that clung to her body like defiance. She wasn't hiding tonight. Her chin was lifted, her lips painted a deep shade of red, and her eyes, those dark, unblinking eyes, were locked on him. Marcus froze for a moment, unsettled by the recognition. He remembered her face from that exam room, her voice begging him to listen, and for the first time in years, he felt the sting of shame crawl up the back of his neck. But Clarissa didn't look humiliated anymore. She looked powerful. He told himself it was the whiskey, that his mind was playing tricks. But curiosity gripped him, and he found himself walking toward her booth. "Clarissa," he said, forcing a smile, "it's been a long time." She tilted her head, her expression unreadable. "It has. Longer than you think, doctor." Her voice was steady, low, carrying something he couldn't quite place. There was no pleading in it now, no trembling, only certainty. Marcus slid into the booth across from her, pretending he was in control. But inside, something shifted. He felt as though he had stepped into a game he didn't know the rules to. Clarissa leaned forward, her perfume subtle but sharp. "Funny how paths cross, isn't it? You, sitting here alone. Me, waiting for company." He chuckled nervously. Maybe fate decided to play matchmaker. She smiled faintly, though her eyes never softened. Or maybe fate decided it was time you finally learned what it feels like to be on the other side of things. Marcus laughed it off, brushing her words aside as nothing more than flirtation. But her tone lingered, echoing in his chest like a warning bell he chose to ignore. The night stretched on, the drinks flowed, and the line between curiosity and temptation blurred. By the time Marcus stumbled out into the heavy Alabama air, Clarissa's hand on his arm, he told himself it was just another secret to lock away. Just another night he would never speak of. He didn't know then that the secret he carried out of that bar would be the one to destroy him. The ride from the bar to Clarissa's apartment felt like a dream Marcus couldn't quite control. The night air pressed hot against his skin as he followed her through the dim parking lot, his shoes crunching gravel with every step. She walked with surprising confidence, her dress swaying, her hair catching what little light spilled from the neon bar sign. He kept telling himself he was the one in charge, but deep down, he knew the balance had already shifted. Inside her apartment, the air was thick with the scent of lavender and something else he couldn't place, sharp, medicinal, like rubbing alcohol. Marcus brushed it off, convinced it was just his imagination. Clarissa moved slowly but with purpose, leading him to a living room where every surface seemed too small for her presence. The walls were painted a warm cream, though shadows clung to every corner. She gestured toward the couch. "Make yourself comfortable, doctor." The way she said doctor made his stomach tighten. It wasn't reverence. It wasn't flirtation. It was a reminder, a warning. But Marcus poured himself into the role he always played, confident, untouchable. He sat down, loosened his collar, and smirked. "You know," he said, his voice casual, "people in this town would never believe it if they saw us right now." Clarissa lowered herself into the chair opposite him, her eyes fixed on his. "That's because people in this town don't know you the way I do." Marcus raised a brow, trying to laugh it off. "And how's that?" She leaned forward, her voice soft, cutting. "I know the way you look at people, the way you decide, in seconds, if they're worth your time. I know how quick you are to dismiss the ones who don't fit into your perfect little world." He shifted uncomfortably, hiding it with a sip from the glass she'd set in front of him. "Whiskey, stronger than the bar's pour." "You're making me sound like a villain," he said lightly. "Aren't you?" she asked, tilting her head. The words hung in the room like smoke. Marcus chuckled, but it sounded hollow. He leaned back, crossing his legs, pretending her words didn't sting. "Look, Clarissa, I'm not here for philosophy. I'm here because, well, let's just say curiosity got the better of me." Her lips curved into a faint smile. "Curiosity can be dangerous." He smirked. "So can I." The line might have worked on someone else, but Clarissa didn't even flinch. She stood, walked toward him, and for a moment, Marcus thought about leaving. Something about the way she looked down at him, as though she were the one choosing, unsettled him. But pride anchored him to the couch. He wasn't about to back down. She reached out, her hand grazing his shoulder. Her touch was soft, deliberate. Still think you're in control, Marcus? His throat went dry. He forced a laugh, standing quickly, taking her hand in his. Why wouldn't I be? Her eyes narrowed, but she said nothing. She simply turned, leading him toward the bedroom. The room was dim, lit only by a single lamp in the corner. The bed was massive, sheets pulled tight, the scent of bleach sharp in the air. Marcus felt a flicker of unease, but he pushed it aside. He wasn't a man who second-guessed himself, not when desire clouded his judgment. As he fumbled with his tie, Clarissa's voice cut through the silence. Tell me something, doctor. Do you ever think about the people you've turned away? He froze, halfway through unbuttoning his shirt. What? The ones you didn't help. The ones who begged you, and you dismissed them. Do you ever think about what happened to them after you shut the door? Marcus scowled, his pride pricked. You really want to have this conversation now? She stepped closer, her expression unreadable. Yes. He swallowed hard. I don't keep count. People are responsible for themselves. I can't save everyone. Clarissa's smile was slow, deliberate, chilling. No, Marcus, you can't. But sometimes the ones you leave behind find ways to come back. For a moment, he wanted to demand what she meant, to push her for clarity. But he didn't. He didn't want to give her the satisfaction of rattling him. Instead, he leaned into the role he knew best, the man who took what he wanted. He pulled her close, pressing his lips against hers. Her body was warm, enveloping, her breath steady. But even as passion flared, Marcus couldn't shake the echo of her words. Sometimes the ones you leave behind find ways to come back. Hours later, the apartment was silent, save for the hum of the air conditioner fighting the Alabama heat. Marcus lay in the tangled sheets, staring at the ceiling, his body heavy with exhaustion. Clarissa sat at the edge of the bed, her back to him, her long hair falling over her shoulders. You think this is just another night for you, she said quietly. Another secret you'll bury. Marcus chuckled sleepily. That's exactly what it is. She turned her head slightly, her profile outlined by the dim lamp. Secrets have a way of digging themselves back up. You'll see. He frowned, propping himself on one elbow. What are you talking about? But she didn't answer. She only stood, adjusted her dress, and walked out of the room. Left alone, Marcus told himself she was being dramatic, that he had nothing to fear. Yet as he drifted into uneasy sleep, her words gnawed at him, burrowing deeper than he wanted to admit. By morning, he would understand. Marcus woke to the sound of his own groan. At first, it was subtle, a dull ache low in his body, the kind of discomfort a man might dismiss after too much whiskey and too little sleep. But as he shifted beneath the sheets, the pain sharpened, stabbing, burning. His eyes flew open. The Alabama sunlight spilled weakly through the blinds, striping the room in gold and shadow. For a moment, he couldn't remember where he was. Then the smell hit him. Sharp, sour, like meat left too long in the sun. His heart thudded against his ribs. Marcus threw back the sheets. What he saw made his stomach twist. His manhood, swollen, discolored, angry red streaked with patches of gray. And worse, a wetness seeped across the sheets, thick and foul. No, 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 he muttered, scrambling off the bed. His legs trembled as he stumbled into the bathroom. He flicked on the harsh light, gripping the sink with white knuckles. The reflection staring back at him was a man undone. Sweat plastered his hair to his forehead, his eyes wide, frantic. He tugged at his waistband, forcing himself to look again. The sight was worse than the smell. His flesh looked as though it was dying, rotting before his eyes. Oh God, his voice cracked. Panic surged through him. He grabbed the faucet, splashing cold water, scrubbing frantically, as if he could wash away whatever curse clung to him. The burning only intensified. His breath came in ragged gasps. This isn't possible. I'm a doctor. I would know. I would have seen this. But he hadn't. He couldn't explain it. Marcus staggered back into the bedroom. Clarissa was gone. Her side of the bed was perfectly smoothed, as though she had never been there at all. On the nightstand, though, sat a single glass of water. He stared at it, chest heaving. Had she left it for him? Or was it a silent reminder that she was always one step ahead? The room spun. His phone buzzed in his pocket. With shaking hands, he pulled it out and dialed the only colleague he trusted, Dr. Randall Pierce, a urologist in town. Marcus. Randall's voice was groggy, thick with sleep. I need you, Marcus stammered. Something's wrong. Very wrong. Wrong how? I can't. Marcus pressed a hand to his forehead, fighting for words. It's rotting, Randall. It's rotting. Silence on the other end. Then Randall's voice hardened. Stop joking. What the hell are you talking about? I'm not joking, Marcus shouted, his voice cracking into hysteria. I woke up this morning and it's dying. My flesh is blackening. Randall swore under his breath. Listen to me. Get to the hospital. Now. Don't waste time. I'll meet you there. Marcus dropped the phone, his body shaking. The thought of walking out that door, of anyone seeing him like this, twisted his pride into knots. But the smell, the pain, it was unbearable. He yanked on his clothes, grimacing as the fabric pressed against his raw skin. Every step felt like fire licking through his veins. The world outside seemed cruelly bright as he staggered to his car. The short drive to the hospital stretched into eternity, every bump in the road a new wave of agony. By the time he stumbled into the emergency entrance, sweat soaked through his shirt. Nurses rushed forward, their expressions shifting from confusion to alarm as the stench hit them. Get him into a room, one barked. Marcus collapsed onto the gurney, clutching his stomach, shame and terror warring inside him. He heard whispers, gasps, the hurried shuffle of feet. Randall burst through the doors moments later, his face pale. Jesus, Marcus. He leaned over, his voice low but firm. What the hell did you do? Marcus shook his head violently, his eyes wild. I don't know. It was just a woman. Last night. And then this. Randall's jaw tightened. A woman? Who? Marcus swallowed hard, but Clarissa's name stuck in his throat. He couldn't say it. Couldn't give her that power. Never mind that, Randall snapped. We need to get cultures, imaging, for antibiotics. Move. Hours blurred into chaos. Needles pierced his skin, machines hummed, voices overlapped. Words like necrosis and flesh-eating bacteria floated through the haze. Marcus lay there, body trembling, feeling pieces of himself slipping away. At one point, Randall leaned close, his eyes grave. Marcus, we may have to consider surgical removal. Debridement. Possibly more. The implication slammed into him like a blow. No, you can't. I'm not. You don't have a choice, Randall cut him off. This thing will spread. It's already moving faster than anything I've seen. Marcus squeezed his eyes shut, while rising in his throat. His arrogance, his pride, all crumbled beneath the weight of raw fear. As the night stretched on, fragments of memory clawed at him. Clarissa's eyes across the bar. Her words in the bedroom. Do you ever think about the people you've turned away? He saw her face again, the way she had begged him once, years ago, for help. He had dismissed her. He had turned his back. And now, lying on a sterile hospital bed with death creeping through his body, he felt the echo of her revenge, or perhaps fate's twisted justice. The infection spread. He screamed until his voice broke, clawing at the sheets, begging for relief. Nurses came and went, their pity hidden behind professional masks. He was the doctor once. Now he was just another patient circling the drain. By dawn, Marcus knew one thing with absolute certainty. This wasn't random. It wasn't chance. It was payback. The sterile walls of the hospital room pressed in on Marcus like a prison. Machines beeped rhythmically at his side, a cruel reminder that every second mattered. His body shook with fever, sweat soaking the sheets. The smell of decay lingered, no matter how much the nurses scrubbed or how many antiseptics they sprayed. He had been stripped of everything, his dignity, his confidence, his power. For once, Dr. Marcus Harlow was just another man trapped in a hospital bed, terrified of what tomorrow might bring. When the door creaked open, he expected Randall. Instead, it was Dr. Elaine Carter, the sharp-eyed infectious disease specialist he had crossed paths with years ago. She wasn't smiling. Marcus, she said flatly, sliding on a pair of gloves. We need to talk. He tried to sit up, but the pain anchored him down. Elaine, I need you to fix this. You're the best. Whatever it takes, do it. Her gaze flicked over the chart at the end of his bed, her lips tightening. This infection, it's spreading faster than anything I've seen. It's rare, aggressive, and resistant to most antibiotics. We're running out of options. Marcus gritted his teeth. Then find new ones. Elaine snapped her head toward him, her eyes flashing. That's not how this works. You think medicine is magic because you've coasted on arrogance for years. But this is real. And I can't ignore the history here. He blinked, confused. What history? She dropped the chart onto the table with a loud smack. Clarissa Monroe. The name hit him like ice water. His throat closed. Elaine's voice sharpened. Do you remember her? She came to your clinic 4 years ago. She was desperate. Fever, swelling, tissue breakdown. She begged for help. And you sent her away with nothing but a lecture about losing weight. Marcus swallowed hard, his voice a whisper. That was different. She was sick. Elaine cut him off. And you ignored it. She nearly died because of you. Memories clawed at Marcus. The look in Clarissa's eyes as she clutched the edge of his desk, the way her words had cracked under the weight of humiliation. He had brushed her off, eager to move on to the next patient, the next golf game, the next drink. Elaine leaned closer. She survived, but she carried something with her. That infection never fully cleared. It turned her body into a breeding ground for bacteria we barely understand. And now, you waltz into her life again, and you think it's chance that you're lying here rotting? Marcus's pulse raced. You're saying she did this on purpose? That's she. I'm saying actions have consequences, Elaine said coldly. She didn't have to do anything. You did this to yourself the moment you dismissed her. His eyes burned. I didn't mean. No, you never mean, Elaine spat. But you leave destruction in your wake, and this time, it circled back. Hours passed in a blur of tests and procedures. Every intervention seemed useless. Marcus drifted in and out of delirium, his mind clawing at fragments of the past. He remembered Clarissa's trembling hands in his clinic. He remembered the way she had begged him, her voice shaking. And now he remembered her calm warning in the bedroom. Secrets have a way of digging themselves back up. By evening, Randall returned, his face grave. He closed the blinds and pulled up a chair. Marcus, he said, voice low, we need to prepare you for the worst. Marcus's heart slammed against his ribs. The worst? Randall nodded. This infection, it's necrotizing fasciitis. Flesh-eating bacteria. We've managed to slow it, but it's deeper than we thought. If we don't remove the affected tissue soon, it'll spread to your bloodstream. And then it's over. Marcus shook his head violently. You can't. I won't survive that kind of mutilation. Randall's eyes softened. It's the only chance you have. Silence swallowed the room. Marcus stared at the ceiling, his pride screaming inside him. He had spent his life in control, of patience, of women, of his future. Now the thought of losing himself, of being reduced to nothing, shattered him. The next morning, Clarissa herself appeared. She stood in the doorway of his hospital room, framed by the fluorescent light. She was dressed simply, her dark hair pulled back, her face calm. Marcus froze, his breath catching. Why are you here? His voice was raw, desperate. She stepped inside, closing the door gently behind her. To see you. He tried to sit up, grimacing in pain. You did this. Clarissa tilted her head, her expression unreadable. Did I? Or did you? Tears of rage welled in his eyes. You infected me. You set me up. She cut him off with a sharp laugh, though there was no joy in it. I didn't have to. You did it yourself. You came to me. You touched me. You ignored the warning in my eyes. Just like you ignored me when I begged you for help. Her words sliced through him deeper than the infection ever could. I almost died because of you, she continued, her voice steady. I carried this pain, this sickness, for years. You thought you were untouchable. But tell me, Marcus, how does it feel to be on the other side? His lips trembled. Please, Clarissa, help me. For the first time, her expression softened, not with pity, but with finality. You don't need my help. You need to face what you've done. She turned to leave, her footsteps echoing in the sterile hallway. Marcus called after her, his voice breaking. Don't walk away. Don't leave me like this. But she didn't stop. She didn't look back. Elaine entered moments later, finding Marcus trembling, tears streaking his face. She placed a hand on his chart and spoke gently. You've got hours before we decide. Surgery or death. Those are your choices. Marcus shut his eyes. For the first time in his life, the man who once believed he was above everyone else had to confront a truth he couldn't escape. He was powerless. The hours dragged like chains. Every tick of the clock echoed inside Marcus's skull. He lay in the hospital bed, body trembling, sweat soaking his gown. His once strong hands now shook uncontrollably, veins darkened by infection creeping beneath the skin. He had spent his life commanding rooms, demanding respect with a single look. Now, nurses barely made eye contact. They hurried in and out, masks hiding their expressions, though he could feel their disgust, their pity. The smell of rot clung to him, no matter how many sterile cloths they used. Marcus was alone with his thoughts and his fear. That night, fever dreams consumed him. He saw Clarissa's face hovering above him, not the soft, pleading patient he once dismissed, but the woman in black from the bar, eyes sharp, voice steady. "You thought you were untouchable," she whispered in the dream. "Now you know what it feels like to beg." He jolted awake, gasping, the heart monitor shrieking in alarm. A nurse rushed in, adjusting the four, murmuring reassurances, but Marcus barely heard. His chest heaved as he stared into the dark corner of the room, half expecting to see Clarissa standing there, watching. By morning, Dr. Elaine Carter and Randall stood at his bedside. Their faces were grim. "We can't wait any longer," Elaine said. "The infection is advancing. If we don't operate, you won't last 24 hours. Marcus's lips quivered. "Operate? You mean?" Randall's eyes dropped. "Amputation. Radical. It's the only way to stop the spread." The words crashed down on him like a hammer. His mind reeled. Amputation. The very thing that defined his pride, his masculinity, gone. He felt stripped bare, reduced to nothing. "No," he rasped, shaking his head violently. "You can't, you won't. I'd rather die." Elaine's gaze hardened. "That may be exactly what happens." Hours bled together. Marcus refused consent, clinging to his pride even as his body betrayed him. He drifted between agony and delirium, his mind spiraling back through the years. He remembered the women he had used and discarded, the patients he had mocked, the times he had chosen his own ego over compassion. Every memory pressed down like a weight on his chest. When the door opened that evening, Marcus thought it was another nurse. But it was Clarissa. She stood at the foot of his bed, dressed in simple clothes, her dark hair pulled into a loose braid. Her presence filled the room, silent yet overwhelming. Marcus's eyes widened. Why are you here?" She stepped closer, her gaze unwavering. "To give you what you never gave me. A chance to be heard." His throat tightened. "Clarissa, please. I didn't mean to." She raised a hand, silencing him. "You think apologies will wash away what you did? You dismissed me. You told me my pain didn't matter. You made me feel invisible." Tears welled in Marcus's eyes. "I was wrong. I see that now. Please, Clarissa, help me." Her voice was steady, each word deliberate. "Help? The way you helped me? You left me to suffer. To rot. You never thought about me again." He shook his head desperately. "I did. No," she cut in sharply. "You didn't. Men like you never do. You only think of yourselves until it's too late." Marcus's chest heaved with sobs. "Then why are you here? To watch me die?" Clarissa's expression softened slightly, not with pity, but with a quiet strength. "I'm here to show you the truth. This isn't my revenge, Marcus. It's yours. You built this moment with every cruel word, every careless dismissal. The infection didn't kill you. Your arrogance did." Her words struck like a blade. Marcus broke, his sobs echoing in the sterile room. He reached out, trembling, but Clarissa stepped back. "Don't," she whispered. "I'm not here to comfort you. I'm here so you'll understand." She turned, her footsteps soft against the tile, and disappeared into the hallway. That night, Marcus lay in the dark, his mind unraveling. He thought about the boy he once was, bright, ambitious, full of dreams of saving lives. Somewhere along the way, he had twisted that dream into hunger for power, control, superiority. And now it had eaten him alive. He whispered into the empty room, his voice cracking. "I'm sorry, Clarissa. I'm sorry." No one answered. By dawn, his condition had worsened. His fever spiked, his skin pale and clammy. Elaine stood over him, her voice firm. "Marcus, listen to me. This is your last chance. Surgery or death. Decide now." He stared at her, hollow-eyed, broken. For the first time, he whispered the truth. "I don't deserve to live." Elaine's jaw tightened. "Deserve has nothing to do with it. Do you want to live?" Marcus closed his eyes. Tears slipped down his cheeks. He couldn't answer. In his final hours of clarity, Marcus begged for a priest. Father Daniels arrived, an old man with kind eyes. He sat by the bed, listening as Marcus poured out everything. The arrogance, the cruelty, the night with Clarissa, the infection now devouring him. "Do you think God can forgive me?" Marcus asked, voice trembling. The priest studied him quietly, then said, Forgiveness is God's to give. But sometimes, the hardest part is forgiving yourself. Marcus wept. That night, Clarissa returned one last time. She stood in the doorway, watching him writhe in pain. He saw her through blurry eyes, reached out a trembling hand. Her voice was soft, almost gentle. You wanted to feel powerful. Now you feel human. Clarissa, his voice cracked. Stay, please, don't leave me alone. She stepped forward, touched his forehead lightly, then leaned close to whisper. I already stayed longer than you ever did for me. Her hand slipped away. She turned and walked out, her figure swallowed by the hallway light. Marcus cried out, but his voice was weak. The sound faded into silence. By the next morning, Marcus was barely conscious. His body was failing, his pride shattered. Nurses whispered at the desk. Doctors prepared futile interventions. But deep down, everyone knew. The man who once thought himself untouchable had been undone, not by fate, not by disease alone, but by the weight of his own arrogance. The hospital was quiet in the early morning hours, the kind of stillness that made every sound feel amplified. The hum of fluorescent lights, the distant beeping of monitors, the shuffle of shoes on tile floors. In room 314, Dr. Marcus Harlow lay dying. His breaths were shallow, each one rattling like broken glass in his chest. The infection had spread beyond saving. His body, once strong and commanding, was now pale, fragile, and hollowed out. Machines surrounded him, but even they seemed to recognize the futility of their task. For the first time in his life, Marcus felt small, invisible, forgotten. Dr. Elaine Carter stood at the foot of the bed, arms folded tightly against her chest. She had seen countless patients fade in these same beds, but watching Marcus slip away struck a different chord. He wasn't just another name on a chart. He was a reminder of what happened when arrogance eclipsed compassion. Randall joined her, shaking his head. He's not going to make it through the day. Elaine's jaw clenched. No, he isn't. They both stood in silence, listening to the slow, labored rhythm of Marcus's breath. Around mid-morning, the door opened again. Clarissa Monroe entered, her presence quiet but undeniable. She carried herself with the calm of someone who had weathered storms few could imagine. Her eyes swept over Marcus's frail body, and for the first time, there was no anger in them. Only a strange, solemn acceptance. Elaine bristled at the sight of her. What are you doing here? Clarissa's voice was steady. Saying goodbye. Elaine wanted to protest, but something in Clarissa's tone silenced her. She stepped aside, watching as Clarissa moved to Marcus's bedside. Marcus stirred, his eyes fluttering open. Through the haze of fever, he saw her standing over him. His lips trembled. Clarissa. She leaned closer so he could hear. His voice was a rasp, broken by weakness. Don't leave me, not yet. Clarissa studied him, her face unreadable. Finally, she said softly, I never wanted you dead, Marcus. I only wanted you to see me, to hear me, to treat me like I mattered. Tears welled in his eyes. I see you now. I do. She shook her head gently. Too late. Her words weren't cruel, only true. Marcus reached out with trembling fingers, but she didn't take his hand. Instead, she stood back, allowing the silence to stretch between them. It was the silence of all the moments he had stolen from her years ago, the silence of dismissal, of neglect, of being unseen. Now he was the one pleading into the void. As the hours crawled forward, Marcus drifted in and out of consciousness. His mind replayed fragments of his life, the triumphs, the conquests, the smug smirks after each victory. But now those images curdled into regret. He saw the faces of patients he had brushed aside, their eyes hollow with disappointment. He heard the echo of Clarissa's voice begging for help, the slam of his office door as he had walked away. The weight of it crushed him. By evening, his body gave its final warning. The monitors screamed as his breathing faltered, each gasp weaker than the last. Nurses rushed in, adjusting lines, calling out vitals, but the truth was clear. Elaine stepped forward, her voice firm. Enough. Let him go. Randall hesitated, then nodded. The machines were silenced one by one until only Marcus's ragged breaths filled the room. Clarissa remained at his side, watching with eyes that seemed older than her years. Marcus's lips moved, a whisper barely audible. Forgive me. Clarissa leaned down, her voice soft, almost tender. I don't have to forgive you. You need to forgive yourself. With that, Marcus Harlow exhaled one final breath. His chest stilled. His eyes glazed over. The man who once towered above others in pride was gone, reduced to silence. The room stayed heavy with his absence. Elaine bowed her head, whispering a quiet prayer under her breath. Randall pulled the sheet up over Marcus's chest, his hands trembling. Clarissa lingered, staring at the still figure. She expected to feel triumph, vindication, maybe even joy. But what filled her chest was something heavier, more complicated. Relief, yes. Sadness, too. Not for Marcus himself, but for the years wasted, the pain inflicted, the lives changed forever by his arrogance. She turned to Elaine, her voice calm. It's over. Elaine studied her for a long moment. Do you feel better? Clarissa thought about it, then shook her head. No, but I feel free. Elaine nodded slowly, understanding more than she wanted to admit. The funeral was small. Few colleagues came. Fewer friends. The man who once commanded attention now left the world with barely a ripple. The casket was lowered into the Alabama earth under a sky heavy with gray clouds. Clarissa stood at the back, dressed in black, her face unreadable. She didn't cry. She didn't move closer. She only whispered to herself, "Now you know what it feels like to be forgotten." For a brief moment, as the casket descended, Clarissa felt the sting of tears burning at the corners of her eyes. She bit them back, refusing to let the crowd see her weakness, but inside, a storm churned. The memory of that first day in Marcus's office replayed like an old film reel, his cold voice, the way he had dismissed her as though she were nothing. Now, standing among murmurs of pity and whispers of scandal, she realized those words would haunt her forever. Yet the tears that finally slipped down her cheek weren't for Marcus. They were for the years she had lost to shame, for the nights she had begged God for relief, and for the woman she might have been if someone had cared enough to listen. The scent of damp earth rose as the grave was filled, and Clarissa inhaled deeply. It was the same smell that had clung to Marcus in his final days, a smell of rot and endings. But here, in the open air, it felt different. It felt like closure. She wiped her cheek quickly, straightened her shoulders, and whispered to herself, "This is the last time I'll cry for him." And with that vow, she turned her gaze to the horizon, no longer the invisible woman, but a survivor stepping out of the shadow of his indifference. Elaine, standing a few feet away, caught the words. She placed a hand on Clarissa's arm. "You deserve peace now. Don't carry him any longer." Clarissa gave a faint nod, her gaze fixed on the fresh dirt. "I won't." Weeks later, life in the town moved on. The clinic Marcus once ran closed its doors, a for lease sign slapped across the glass. Patients went elsewhere, spreading stories of the doctor who thought himself untouchable until he wasn't. Elaine carried the memory of it all into her practice. Every patient who walked into her office, every plea she heard, she treated as though it might be their last chance. She had learned the cost of indifference, and she vowed never to pay it. As for Clarissa, she walked the streets with her head higher than before. People still whispered, but their words no longer chained her. She had faced the man who had once dismissed her, watched him crumble, and walked away whole. At night, she would sit on her porch, the Alabama breeze brushing her face, and remind herself of one truth. Survival was the sweetest revenge. The story of Dr. Marcus Harlow ended not with triumph, but with rot, physical, moral, and spiritual. He had built a life on arrogance, blind to the pain of those he swore to heal. In the end, his downfall was not just inevitable. It was deserved. And for those who remained, Clarissa, Elaine, the townspeople, it was a reminder that dignity, compassion, and humility mattered more than pride ever could. In the months that followed, Marcus Harlow's story became something more than a cautionary tale. In diners, barbershops, and church parking lots, people whispered about the doctor who had once strutted through town in spotless white coats, only to die rotting in a hospital bed. Some spoke of karma, others of fate, but all agreed on one thing. Arrogance had dragged him to the grave. Parents told the story to their children in softened tones, how pride could blind a man, how cruelty could circle back like a boomerang. Old women shook their heads at the mention of his name, warning, "Don't ever think you're too high to fall. Look what happened to Dr. Harlow." The legend even reached beyond the town limits. Travelers passing through Alabama heard the tale retold at truck stops and gas stations, each version more embellished than the last. Some swore Clarissa had cursed him. Others said the infection was punishment straight from God. Whatever the version, the ending was always the same. The man who thought himself untouchable had been reduced to dust. Clarissa, meanwhile, walked with a new kind of freedom. When people saw her now, their whispers carried less mockery and more awe. She had survived. She had endured. And though she never sought the spotlight, her very presence became its own form of testimony. In time, the town moved on, but Marcus's downfall lingered like the echo of a church bell after midnight. Faint, haunting, impossible to forget. His name became a story parents told, pastors preached, and neighbors muttered whenever they spoke of pride, power, and the steep price of neglect.